What's up, guys? How's it going? This is Volaan again, back with another video, but this time I'm going to make a reference guide for those who are either just getting into the My Hero Academia collectible card game or those who have been playing or did a demo but couldn't remember how certain things work. So this is going to be sort of like a quick reference guide. It's going to be a bit of a long video, but it's going to have points that you can jump to in the video. So, down at the bottom, if you want to click a certain chapter or a certain section, you can just jump right to it and get the answer that you need really quick on how to play something. If it's like an action or an asset or, a foundation, a character, an attack card. But let's get into it. Enough of this intro. Let's get started. All right, so with this section, we are covering character cards. If you did a demo or if you've been playing for a bit, you could probably skip this section, but we're just going to cover briefly if you did not do a demo or if you just picked up, some starter decks and you have no clue what to do with these cards. There is a playmat in the background that shows you the card zones. So use that as a reference for places of where to go. It says card pool. You have your character slot, you have your momentum, you have your deck, your discard, and your play zones. So the card pool is your play zones, but we're going to be talking about the character slot and the momentum today, and a little bit about the card pool in this section. All right, not going to go into too much detail with advanced details, because then this would take like an hour to describe everything about characters. So covering the character statistics, we're going to use Midoriya as an example because he's Midoriya and he's the main character. So at the top left of the card, you see a giant orange number 6. That is the difficulty in which to play a character. Not the character that is in your character zone in the stage on the playmat, but a character that is in your hand. And I will cover with our third character how to play or what to do with those characters. So then you have the name at the top middle. To the right of his name is a giant shield with a circle. That is the block modifier. You can block with characters, not the one that's in the character zone, but the one that is in your hand. You draw into them by putting more characters into your deck. So underneath the difficulty on the far left middle of the card, next to his character image, you have a number 6 in green rectangles. That is your hand size. That's how many cards you will be drawing each turn, each one of your turns. Keep that in mind. From the start of the game to the end of the game, every time it is your turn, you will draw up to 6 cards. That is your hand size. Underneath that is the heart. His health is 28, so that he has 28 life points. When you reach 0, you've lost the game. That's pretty straightforward and simple. Underneath the heart is the text box. So let's cover the text box. In the far left, we'll move from left to right. You have the 3 elements. So when deck building, you have to select one of those elements from the 3 elements, and every card in the deck has to have that one element that you chose. So what are the 3 elements that Midoriya has? He has good, which is the halo. Under that, he has life, which is the yellow dot with the leaf, with the leaf or grass in the middle. Then the third symbol is order, which is the white dot with the scales inside of it. So like I said, when deck building, you choose one of those 3, not all 3, but you choose one of those 3. So if you want to make a good deck, you would find every card that has good in it in the element, because they all have the same text box, and you would put all those cards into that one deck. All right, so next to that, we have the text box. Midoriya has 2 enhance abilities. Enhance abilities can be used after an attack card is played. So after either you or your rival plays an attack card, you will enter the enhance step, where you can use enhance abilities during that time, one at a time. You go back and forth. You cannot use all of them at once. It's not a rapid fire of just, I use this effect, I use this effect, I use this effect. No. You have to take turns. It goes back and forth. So when can you use these enhance abilities? The first enhance says name an attack zone. There are 3 colored bubbles, which we'll get into when we get into the attack cards. High attack, mid attack, and low attack, red, orange, and yellow. If your rival's next attack this turn matches the zone, it gets -3 speed. So if you think your rival, the other person who's playing against you, is going to play a high attack as their next card, then you would call high attack, and if they do play a high attack, they get -3 speed. We'll cover speed when we get into attacking and blocking and all that stuff, foundations and all of that. We'll get into that. But it slows down the card, making it easier for you to block it. And it also can scare them into just not playing that zone. So if you don't have a card that can block, let's say a high attack, you would call that high attack to sort of want to deter your opponent from playing a high attack. Then next, his second enhance says once per turn, which means you can only use it once per that turn that you're in. So if it's your turn, you can only use it once that entire turn. If it's your rival's turn, you can only use it once that turn. The rest of the text says discard your hand, meaning all cards in your hand go to the discard pile, aka the graveyard if you're familiar with other games. Your punch attack gets plus 10 damage. Now that's really huge. You get plus 10 damage. All right. So keep that in mind. All right. So the last thing we're going to look at on the right hand side is the version and the check number. So the version of this card is number 1. There's a very small number 1 and it says character on the right hand side. That means this is version 1 of Midoriya. There are 4 versions at this time in the game of this recording of Midoriya. So there are different versions of him as he's progressed and evolved through the story. And at the bottom is the blue number, which is a 6, which means that is the cost. So we'll get into how to pay for cards later, but normally you would take a card off the top of your deck after you play a card in the card pool, as you see on screen. And you would take the top card of your deck, put it into your discard pile face up, and whatever that blue number is, if it's equal or greater than the orange number of the card you're playing, then it pays for it. And I'll get into mechanics in another video, but that's a whole nother video that's going to take hours to explain. So that is Izuku Midoriya. He is our standard character, and pretty much characters follow this kind of template. One thing I will note before we move to the next character is that the higher the hand size, the lower the health. The lower the hand size, the higher the health. So moving on to Eraserhead. Eraserhead, also known as Aizawa, as you see, has a lot of the similarities from Midoriya. 6 difficulty, 0 block modifier, 6 check, number 1 on character. This is his first version. He has a 7 card hand size and 19 health. He has different elements. So his elements are all, death, and void. The all is the orange circle with little arrows pointing in every direction. The void under the skull is this swirling gear-like thing that no one's been able to explain. But the reason why we're using Eraserhead as an example is because he has different effects than Midoriya. So Eraserhead has a passive. A passive ability is something that is always active throughout the entire game. It does not get turned off. There's nothing to shut it off. It's just there. It's always in play. And you will see passives on characters with all white text that don't say enhance and that don't say response or form or anything else. All right. So his passive says before the game begins, add up to 1 copy of Erase from your deck to your discard pile, then shuffle your deck. Erase is an action card, which we will show when we get to the action section so you can see what it looks like. But they are blue cards that can only be played from the hand. So you can only activate them from the hand. I'll cover that more into action in the action section. But they can only be activated from the hand. For Eraserhead, his erase ability, which turns off other players' quirks, is a card that goes into the discard pile so you can get it to your hand to use his enhance ability. If you want to read his enhance ability, go ahead, but I'm going to cover the response ability. which is different from Midoriya. So Eraserhead has the response of commit, which is to tap or turn the character sideways. So in the character zone, it will be vertical. You're going to completely turn it sideways to show that you're turning the character off to pay for this effect. It says, after you play or block with an action card, draw 2 cards. All right, so responses can be used at any time you meet the criteria to activate that ability. Moving on to our last character example, we're going to cover Mount Lady. Mount Lady is special in her own right because she can have other copies of Mount Lady in the staging area. If you read her enhanced abilities, her first enhanced ability says, add 1 copy of Mount Lady from your discard pile to your stage face up. If you could not, you may add 1 card from your discard pile to your momentum. You cannot use abilities on additional Mount Lady cards or commit them to pass checks. So that means that while you can have multiple copies of Mount Lady, 4 being the maximum copies that you can have of any card in this game at this time, as long as they are in your discard pile, you add them to your stage area where your foundations go. But you cannot use them for anything else. So you can't use her enhanced ability on the other copies of Mount Lady. You can't use them to turn them sideways to pay for playing cards. They're just there to enhance her ability, which her second enhance reads, discard 1 momentum. This attack, mostly meaning your attack, gets +2 damage for each Mount Lady character card in your stage, playable while committed. That final text saying playable while committed means even if you've tapped her or committed her, turned her sideways to turn her off with her first ability, you can still use the second ability while she's committed. But as you read, it said discard 1 momentum. Momentum is something we'll get into when we get into attack cards. But as you saw, it says increase this attack's damage by +2 for each Mount Lady character card in your stage. So you can have a max of 3 additional Mount Ladies in your deck. So that would be 2, 4, 6 damage. That'd be 6 additional damage added to your attack. All right, next up we have foundation cards. Foundation cards can be a little bit tricky because they are kind of the all-purpose cards. They are your currency, they are your effects, they are your permanents, they are your enchantments. There are a lot of other card types from other card games that use something similar. This is where the portion of My Hero Academia becomes more a bit of a deck builder. If you're familiar with deck building board games or tabletop games where you take cards from a pile and you bring them into some area that you control where you can then use those cards to pay for effects and use their effects, etc., etc. This is that portion of the game. So foundations are where you start with in the game. They're what you want to play the most and have the most of for resources, for effects, etc., etc. So one thing to keep in note as we go through explaining foundation cards is going to be the different card zones on the playmat. So as you see on the playmat on the screen, you have the deck, the discard pile, which are on the bottom right. Across the entire top of the playmat is the card pool. That is where you're going to be playing your cards, which are foundations. So you're going to be putting your foundations in the card pool ranging from left to right, always starting from the left because the left has the lowest modifier, which to explain briefly means that when you see those numbers in those zones where it says 0 plus, 1 plus, 2 plus, 3 plus, etc., where it has the card pool with the arrow moving to the right, pointing in the direction you were playing those cards. Those modifiers go to the difficulty of the foundations. So one thing about My Hero Academia is the way that they try to, I want to say, mitigate how many cards you have is by increasing the cost that you have to pay with an additional cost per card to make it harder for you to, get ahead of your opponent, sort of thing, to kind of balance the game. So today's card that we're going to be using will be Requesting Assistance. Requesting Assistance is a foundation that's going to go from your hand to the card pool. And if you successfully paid for that card while it's in the card pool, at the end of your turn, it will go into the stage area where then you can use it for the rest of the game as long as it's in your staging area. All right, so Requesting Assistance will now be on screen. Requesting Assistance is a 0 difficulty card. That's that giant orange 0 number at the top left. The card name is Requesting Assistance, and to the right of the card name is the block modifier. The way that you can tell foundations apart from other cards is that they are gray. So as you see, there is like a gray stone imprint around the 0. Above the name of the card Requesting Assistance is sort of like this gray sort of frame that has gray dots in it. It's like a dark gray background with light gray dots. And then at the very bottom of the card, you see those same continued gray background with gray dots sort of pattern, which lets you know that it is a foundation card. If you're not familiar with the color of the card, you can always look at the far right of the text box. It has a hammer icon, and next to the hammer icon says foundation. So like I said, foundations go from your hand to the card pool, from your card pool to the stage area where you can then use the effects. So how do you pay for Requesting Assistance? So let's look at the card pool from the top left. It says 0+. So let's say Requesting Assistance was the first card in your hand that you want to play. You would put Requesting Assistance in that far left 0+ card slot in the card pool. And then you would take the top card of your deck, flip it over, put it into your discard pile. Now 0 plus 0 equals 0. So at that point, any card with the blue check number at the bottom right, that's from the top of your deck going into your discard pile, will pay for this card. And as you see, it has +1 next to that. So the next card you play, let's say you play another Requesting Assistance, it will be 1 plus 0 on the card is what you need to pay for it. So then you would take another card from the top of your deck, put in your discard pile. If the blue number is equal or higher than 1, you keep the card at the end of the turn, and so on and so forth, and you just keep doing that. All right. There is no limit to how many cards you can play in the card pool. This image is of the default playmat, so it just ends at 5, but you can play more than 5. All right, so I'll get into blocks later because we have a card that's going to go into more detail about blocking. But the block modifier, the color is orange. It is an orange shield. That is the card that you will be blocking with. You can only block with cards that are in your hand. And I want to say that again. You can only block with the cards that are in your hand when you get to the block portion of attacking and blocking. So the orange means that this blocks the middle zone. It has a plus on it. That plus is in the same spot that is the middle slot for a middle attack, which we'll get into in the attack portions. But if you saw the character card portions, Midoriya has an effect where he calls the different attack zones. And so the attack zones have to line up with the block zones. I won't get into too much detail because that's more for the live action play area where I'm demonstrating how that works if you did not do a demo with somebody. But +2 on block modifier, it is a mid block. Just keep that in mind. You can only use it from your hand. Foundations have their own effects in the text box, so they can range from enhances like on this card, responses like you saw on Aizawa or Eraserhead in the character portion, They have forms, they have passives, they have other abilities. But we're going to go over this enhance because it is very simple. The enhance can only be used after an attack card is played, which I'll be repeating that in the attack section. But this ability says enhance. Flip. Flip means to flip this card from face up to face down position. It does not unflip at the end of the turn. It does not unflip on your next turn. It stays face down. That was the cost for using it. So reading it again, it says flip. If you have one or more ready one foundation that has not been readied this combat phase. So what that means, readied, in quotes, what readied means is if a card is committed, which we talked about with Aizawa in the character section, turning a card sideways. If a card is committed or tapped, as commonly known in other card games, it is turned off, and you cannot use that effect unless it says otherwise. Requesting assistance is stating that if you have one or more cards in your momentum section, which is on the screen above the character zone, if you have momentum, then you can ready, which means to untap or put back to vertical the card a foundation, so you can use it again, but you can only do it if it has not been readied this turn already. There are some cards that can do that on their own, where they can ready themselves. There are some characters that can ready cards. There are some abilities that can ready cards. So this is not the only one. Moving on to our next card, we're going to be covering Charged Up. Charged Up is a 2 difficulty card. It is a foundation. It is a 3+ high block modifier, and it has the same elements as requesting assistance, being air, the blue swirl symbol at the top of the text box, chaos, which is a bronze triangular symbol, don't know how else to describe that, and order, which we saw from Midoriya, which is the white dot with the scales in it. And Charged Up has a response, which is just like what we covered with Aizawa in the character section. It says response, remove. Remove is the cost to playing this effect. It means remove it from the game, exile it, banish, other different names for effects. So remove this card from the game. After your charge or stun attack, we'll get into that in the attack section. After your charge or stun attack deals damage, add 1 card from your discard pile to your momentum. So the discard pile being the graveyard. We saw this with Mount Lady, where she had an ability to where you could add a card from your discard pile to your momentum, or from your discard pile to your staging area. So these effects are very common. The next card is League Interview. League Interview is a 2 difficulty, 3+ block modifier. It has the elements of chaos, death, and fire, which is the fireball down there at the bottom. It has the effects of first form and response, and it has a 6 check at the bottom right. So Charged Up had a 5 check. Requesting Assistance had a 5 check as well, the blue number. We're going to cover first form. So the form ability means whenever you can play a card in your card pool during your turn, you would activate that ability. I'm going to say that again. Whenever you could play a card in your card pool is when you can activate a form ability. This form ability on League Interview says first form, which means it has to be the first form that you play in the entire turn. All right. So anytime you see the word first, there'll be cards that say first enhance, first form. First just means it has to be the first thing you do whenever the criteria meets when you can play that ability. So first form, this card has to be in your stage, League Interview. You activate first form by announcing it to your rival. After you've drawn your cards and you're about to play some cards, while League Interview is in your stage, you say, I am going to activate my first form ability of League Interview. And first form states, discard the top 2 cards of your deck. So you take the top 2 cards from your deck, put them in your discard pile. Your next check to play an attack gets +1. Now, what that means is when you play an attack after activating this ability, the blue number that you use to check to play the cards from the top of your deck, putting them into the discard pile, will get a +1 added to it from this effect. So, League Interview is in your staging area. You activate the first form ability, you discard the top 2 cards. Then let's say you put a die to remind yourself, +1, put it on top of requesting assistance. Okay. Now you play an attack in the card pool. When you play that attack, you take the top card of your deck, flip it over, put it into your discard pile, and let's say it was charged up. Charged up has a 5 check. That 5 now becomes a 6. And as I said earlier at the beginning of this section, whatever the cost is, the orange number at the top left of the card that you're playing, same thing goes for attacks. The blue number from the card that came from the top of your deck to your discard pile has to equal that number or be greater than that number. So let's say you play a 4 difficulty attack. Charged up is a 5. The first form from requesting assistance makes it a 6. It is higher than 4. Therefore, it pays for the attack. You continue with the game. All right. Moving to the opposite side of that, the response on League Interview states, flip, which we learned from requesting assistance. You flip this card face down. After you make a check to play a block, that check gets +1. So, response, flip. After you make a check to block, that check is +1. The same thing that you're doing for the attack card, you will be doing on defense. But you're flipping this card face down. So League Interview will be face down. You can only use this effect once. And the blue number, just like we said for the attack, the blue number at the bottom right of the card from the card that came from the top of your deck, went into your discard pile to pay for you blocking, gets a +1 to that blue number. It's only complicated trying to describe it because it's easier to see it in action, but that's going to be for the live playable section so you can see how that works. For now, just keep in mind that there are different types of effects. So enhance abilities you can only use from the foundation that is in your stage area while an attack is being played. Responsibilities can be activated at any time you meet the criteria. For foundations, the foundation has to be in the staging area unless it says otherwise on the card. And then for forms, form abilities can be activated as long as the foundation is in the staging area, and it is whenever a card can be played. Keep that in mind because forms can be very complicated, but just remember you can only activate that ability when you can play a card. Okay, and it has to be on your turn. You cannot activate a form on your opponent's turn because your opponent is playing cards, not you. You are responding to them playing cards, and on your turn, you are actively playing cards like attacks, foundations, etc. All right. Sorry that's so long, but foundations are very tricky. They're very multi-purpose. They have a wide range of effects, even more than what I've covered. But this is enough to hopefully help you remember or answer some of your questions. All right, now we're at the attack portion of this guide. All right, So attacks are orange bordered cards similar to foundations. Foundations are gray. Attack cards are orange, which is the reason why enhance abilities are written in orange, so that it can remind you, orange attack, now use enhance ability. So for our first example, we will be covering Electric Jolt. Before I bring it up on the screen, attack cards go from your hand into the card pool the same way you would play a foundation. If you watch the foundation section of this video, they have their own difficulty, they have their own block modifier. You play them from the hand, they go into your card pool. Quick note, you cannot play attacks on your first turn in the My Hero Academia format. Jazzco Games has other formats where you can play attacks in the first turn, but as far as My Hero Academia goes, you cannot play attacks on your first turn. All right, you can play them after your first turn, but not on your first turn, because you have no foundations in your stage, you have no resources. There's a reason for that. All right, so let's start with Electric Jolt. Electric Jolt will now be on screen. Electric Jolt is a 4 difficulty attack. It says Electric Jolt. As you can see, it is the orange border, just like foundations. To the right of Electric Jolt, it has a 2 high block modifier. You can block with attack cards that are in your hand during your opponent's turn. All right, what's new to attacks that is not on foundations or character cards are the attack zones. So directly under the shield, which is known as the block modifier, you have a orange bubble that has 3 arrows coming out of it. There are 2 white arrows and 1 single color orange arrow going forward. These are your attack zones. So if the bubble is orange, that is a mid attack zone. If the arrow is pointing upward and it's red, that is a red attack zone. If it is yellow and pointing down, that is a low attack zone. The number inside of that bubble with the arrows is the speed of which the attack is being played. The higher the speed, the harder it is to block. The lower the speed, the easier it is to block. On general average, you will see attacks with somewhere between 3 to 5 speed, depending on the card. So that's where your average is. The lower the speed, generally the higher the attack damage. The higher the speed, generally the lower attack damage. Like I said, generally there are some exceptions, but on average you'll see cards that are 3 speed, 4 damage, 4 speed, 4 damage, 4 speed, 3 damage, 5 speed, 3 or 2 damage, etc., etc. So this is a 3 speed mid attack. That is the language that you would use describing this attack. And underneath that area where the speed is, the circle with the arrow pointing out, is a sort of star burst or an action symbol if you're an artist or if you're in the comics, or if you've watched Adam West's Batman. So you have this sort of bam icon, and inside of that bursting icon, that bursting action icon, is a number. So that is the damage of the attack. So this is a 3 speed mid 4 damage attack card. Okay. Underneath that is the text box. So you have the elements of air on the far left, chaos, and order. We've covered these elements already in previous sections, but air is the blue swirling, chaos is the bronze triangle, and order is the white dot with the scales. So inside the text box, we have some new words. At the top of the text box, it says charge, EX2, and stun 1. Okay, so charge is the type of attack this is. When you're looking at a real card, that text is going to be somewhat small. So, keep in mind that that's the type of attack it is. If there's nothing there in that white text, then it doesn't have an attack type. But this is the attack type. It is a charge attack. So other types of attack types, other types of attacks are punch, kick, fury, weapon, tech, and there's a couple of other ones. Throw, but we'll get into those later. So this one is a charge attack, and it has 2 enhance abilities that will only show up on attack cards. So the first enhance is the EX2. EX is an ability that increases your speed of your attack. So while this attack is in the card pool, you can activate your enhance abilities. EX is a special enhance that states when you use this enhance, you discard cards from your momentum pile to the discard pile. I don't know why I say discord. To the discard pile, and then that number is how much you increase the speed by. So, for example, let's say this is in my card pool, and I announce to my opponent I'm going to use the EX enhance. So let's say I have 2 momentum in my momentum pile. When I send those 2 momentum cards to the discard pile, I will receive 4 speed to this attack because it is 2 per card. Okay. There are different types of cards that have different numbers on them, and there are things that can increase or decrease them, but that's generally how they work. So the next type of enhance that is in that top line of text is stun 1. And we saw cards talking about this in the foundation section of this video that cared about charge or stun attacks. This is what that foundation meant. Stun means that you stun or commit one of your rival's foundations. So what you would do is you would announce it. I am going to activate my stun ability, and the number that is next to it are the number of cards that your rival has to turn sideways. So this has the number of 1, so they would stun 1 card. And then that card generally cannot be readied or untapped until the start of their next turn, or unless they have something like requesting assistance, which was in the foundation section, to ready it. Okay. All right. So Electric Jolt has a regular enhance. This enhance says momentum, and I'll get to the white text afterward. Enhance says momentum flip, as in to flip it face down from where it is in the momentum zone. Commit 1 rival foundation. Now, the reason why I'm reading this in this order is because this enhance says momentum, meaning you can only use this card while it is in the momentum zone in the staging area. All right. The passive for Electric Jolt says if this card is added to your momentum, add it face up. Generally, you add momentum cards to the momentum pile face down, unless they say otherwise. This one says it needs to go in face up. Why? Because it has an enhance ability while it is in the momentum pile that flips it face down to use the effect. Okay. So the second enhance on Electric Jolt states, enhance, if this attack is completely blocked, it still deals 1 damage during the damage step. Now that enhance you would use while the card is in the card pool. So while it's in the card pool, you announce, I'm going to use the enhance. If this attack is completely blocked, it still deals 1 damage during the damage step. That means if someone completely blocks it, there are 2 types of blocking. There's complete block, there's partial block, and then there's also the unused, outside of me, no blocking option. Then if they completely block this card, they would take no damage. Your rival would take no damage at all because they completely blocked it. But this is stating that if it's completely blocked, it still deals 1 point of damage. All right, so we're gonna go to the next example. The next card we're going to talk about is Indiscriminate Shock, 1,300,000 volts, or 1.3 million volts. It is a 5 difficulty attack. I was going to say foundation. It's a 5 difficulty attack. It is a 2 low block modifier. Under the block modifier, it is a 3 speed low attack for 5 damage. Okay. The elements are air, chaos, and order. The attack type is charged, and the secondary attack type is ranged. So remember how I said there could be more than one and there are different types? Electric Jolt was a charged attack type. Indiscriminate Shock is a charge and ranged attack type. And it also has the enhance of Stun 1. So since we've already covered Stun 1 with Electric Jolt, I'm going to move on to the next enhance. The basic enhance, I will say, the first one has enhance. This attack gets +1 damage for each committed rival foundation. So how do you commit rival foundations? You stun them with the stun enhance, or you use the momentum enhance from Jolt to commit their cards, or your rival may commit cards to pay for their own cards. That's another topic in the live gameplay portion, but just covering that, this card gets +1 damage for each card that is committed either by you or by your rival's own doing for paying for effects. The next enhance says, commit 1 foundation, your rival commits 1 foundation. So there are other cards, attacks, foundations, abilities that will make your rivals commit cards, or that will have you commit a card in order to make them commit a card. Okay. All right. Our last attack example is Pillar Swing. Pillar Swing is a 6 difficulty attack. It is a 2 low block modifier. It is a 3 speed mid attack, and it has 8 damage. Now, Pillar Swing from MHACCG's kit has air, chaos, and death as its elements. It has the attack types of charge, slam, and weapon, and it has stun 2 as its specialty enhance. For its normal enhance, it has enhance. If this attack is completely blocked, add it to your momentum. All right, so we already covered different types of ways to add cards into momentum, but I'll cover this a little bit further after I explain this card. The second enhance has the damage of this card cannot be reduced below printed. So printed means what is on the face card. So the attack of this card is 8, and with other foundations and abilities from characters and other cards, you can increase that damage above the printed number. So you could make it 9, 10, 11, 12, etc. But what that effect is stating is that it cannot go below what the card's base printed number is. Okay. So one thing I want to talk about with attack cards is how they get into momentum. How attack cards go into your momentum pile are 2 ways. The first way is if they have successfully dealt damage while in the card pool. At the end of the turn, you may, keywords, may choose to add it to your momentum face down, unless it says otherwise, like Electric Jolt, or you may put those attack cards into your discard pile. Now, the reason why you would want to put your attacks into your momentum versus your discard pile are for enhance abilities like Electric Jolt, which we covered, where it has the EX2. So that enhance ability, EX2, you need momentum to pay for that cost. So your momentum would go underneath your playing character that's in the character zone, face down or face up unless it says otherwise. And then to activate that EX ability, you would then take those cards out of your momentum zone, which go under your character, and put them into your discard for how many times you wish to use that effect. Okay. So there are other ways for cards to get into your momentum pile. Some attacks have their own ability, like with Pillar Swing's first ability, where it says if it's completely blocked, add it to your momentum. So that means before the end of the turn. If it's completely blocked by your opponent, after damage calculation is done and the block is finished, it leaves the card pool and goes face down directly into your momentum. What does that mean moving forward? That means that it has left your card pool, so now you can play an additional card in that same slot. So let's say you played Pillar Swing first in the 0+ slot of the card pool. 0 + 6 is 6. So as we saw with League Interview, if you take League Interview from the top of your deck, put it into your discard pile, you have 6 and 6, it equals, or you can use League Interview to increase your check. Let's say it goes into that first card pool slot. After it's completely blocked, when you activate that effect during your enhanced step, it leaves the 0 slot and goes to the momentum, meaning now you can play another attack or another foundation in that 0 slot that you had it in. Okay, that's kind of an advanced thing to talk about, but it's something you need to know because Bakugo has a similar effect where he can remove cards from his discard pile or discard them to the discard pile, so that way he clears his own card pool as well. And so does Shigaraki. Shigaraki has an ability where he can remove attacks from his card pool, remove them from the game to clear up space. All right, so as far as attacks go from your hand into your card pool. You take the top card of your deck, put it into your discard pile face up. If that blue number is equal or greater than, you keep that card in the card pool. If it is less than the difficulty number, then that attack will go from the card pool to the discard pile, and that will end your turn automatically because you failed the attack. Okay, so keep that in mind. Attack cards do not go into the card pool. Do not go into the stage at the end of the turn like foundations do. They are not foundations. You cannot put attack cards into your stage area face up. If they go into the staging area face up, they go to the discard pile. Most of the time you will see cards on characters and other foundations that will tell you to build an attack face down from your card pool, or you will see effects that say take a card from the top of your deck and build it face down, or from your discard pile into your stage and build it that way. If it is an attack, it always goes face down. And even though it's face down in your stage, you can always look at that card and see what it is, as long as it's in your stage. If it's in your momentum and it's face down, once it goes into your momentum, you can no longer look at it and see what it is. You have to keep it where it is, and you cannot move it around. You cannot change the order of it. It's just there in that extra slot, and it is a unknown card. All right, so that ends it for this section. We'll be moving to the next section. Now, this is the action portion of the video. Actions, there are only two that we're going to cover because they are very straightforward and to the point. The first card we're going to cover is Erase from the Eraserhead kit. I said I would do that because I covered Eraserhead in the first section. Before I display the card on screen, action cards are similar to interrupt spells from other game or instance-based spells from other games. If you're familiar with Magic the Gathering, they are instant spell speed cards or cards with flash. In Yu-Gi-Oh, they would be quick play magic cards or hand traps. In other tabletop games, they would be considered interruption or interrupt spells. So they're pretty fast. They only are played from your hand to the card pool, and that is it. You cannot build them into your stage. They do not go anywhere else. It's just hand, card pool, discard, or removal, depending on what it says. If you build one from a card effect, let's say like a foundation or an attack, where it's from the top card of your deck, it never gets flipped up, just like attack cards and action cards cannot go into the stage face up as of the time of making this video. If that rule changes, I will update this video for the future. But Erase will be on screen now. Erase is a 2 difficulty action card. You can tell it is a action card because it has the blue border. So foundations have the dark gray to blackish border with the gray dots. Attack cards have the orange border background with the yellowish dots, and action cards have the blue border background with the blue dots. Erase has a 1 mid block modifier. It has the elements on the side of the text box of all, death, and void. All is the orange dot with the arrows coming out of it in every direction. Death is the skull, and void is the gray swirling thing icon that I still don't know how to describe. Okay, so in the text box, we have a new word, which is Breaker 1. Breaker 1 is a response that is specific to certain cards. So action cards, foundation cards, and attack cards have Breaker on them. At this time, I'm not aware of any asset cards for the asset section, but just keep in mind that attacks, foundations, and action cards may have Breaker on them. So what Breaker is a response while blocking only. You cannot use it on offense. You can only use it on defense when you are blocking a rival attack. And what Breaker does is it adds the number that's next to it. For this example of Erase, it has a 1 next to it. So you'll be adding 1 point of difficulty to the next card that your opponent plays. Okay, so moving on to the Enhance. The Enhance reads remove, as in remove it from the game, banish it, take it out. Remove, seal 1 asset or foundation. So assets are the next section of this video. They are the green bordered cards that you will see in that section. And what it's saying is to seal a card means that you rotate it until it is upside down. And that completely turns off that card. So that card cannot use any abilities, including passives. It turns off everything about the card, and the card cannot be used. Okay. The way you would play an Enhance on an action card is from your hand. You cannot play them from the discard pile, from the remove from play pile, from the top of your deck, from your stage. They don't go into your stage. They only come from your hand during the Enhance step. Okay. And I'm covering that now for the next card example when we get to that point. The next ability on this card is a response that is for the character only. So Eraserhead is the character. He's the only one that can use this response, and only any version of Eraserhead. So it says Eraserhead response. After an attack is played, your rival cannot play abilities on their character during this attack. Period. Discard this card, from your card pool. So the way this response works is you're on defense and your rival plays an attack. They check the top card of their deck to see if the card stays in the card pool. And after that happens, what you will do is if this card is already in your card pool, let's say from the previous attack, say you blocked with it to use the breaker, you would then activate the response. After an attack is played, your rival cannot play abilities on their character. So erase is turning off their character. Just like how he does in the anime and in the manga, his ability is to shut off other people's powers. So you're going to turn off their abilities for this attack and this attack only. So it's not going to be for the rest of the turns, just for the next attack that is being played currently at this time. And then it says discard this card from your card pool. So it will go to your graveyard. All right. And that is erase. So moving on to the next example of an action card, we're going to cover Summon Dark Shadow. Summon Dark Shadow is from the Tokoyami kit. Summon Dark Shadow, which is on screen now, is a 2 difficulty action card with a 2 mid-block modifier. It has the elements of Chaos, which is the bronze triangle with arrows. It has the element of Evil, which is the black dot with the bronze pitchfork or trident, whichever you would like to consider it. Because it's so small, I really can't tell. And then underneath that is Fire, which is the fireball that we've already covered. So in the text box, Summon Dark Shadow has the keyword ally. Ally means there are 2 characters in this art, so therefore it is an allied attack, or an allied card, or an allied foundation, an allied action card, an allied asset. Ally is a keyword that you can use with other cards like foundations, attacks, characters, etc. So this means something for a specific kit or a deck. Summon Dark Shadow has a passive ability, which we've already shown from other examples. This passive says, while this card is in your card pool, your attacks get +1 speed and +1 damage. Now, that is a very specific wording. So this passive will always be active while this card is in your card pool. And your attacks will get +1 speed, +1 damage regardless. So if you have 2 Summon Dark Shadows, they get +1/+1 for each copy of Summon Dark Shadow. The way you would normally have an action card in your card pool is by playing it from the hand. But there are certain cards that can bring in cards from the discard pile, as we saw with Mount Lady and with some other cards in this video. Tokoyami has an attack where he can add an action card from your discard pile to the card pool. So in that instance, the passive will still activate, but you cannot activate the enhance if you're adding the card from your discard pile to the card pool. I want to make that clear because a lot of people get confused about that ability. This passive is always active as long as it is in the card pool. All right, so Summon Dark Shadow has an enhance. The enhance reads, your next check to play a card this turn gets +3. Commit your character. Okay, so when you play an attack on your turn, let's say you played an attack and you have this action in your hand. All right, so you checked for your attack. You've already done that. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to announce, for my enhance, I'm going to play Summon Dark Shadow's enhance. So it'll come from your hand and it'll go into the card pool. Once it goes into the card pool, you then check for it like you normally would. Top card of your deck to the discard pile. You know, blue number needs to be higher than the orange number on Summon Dark Shadow. And after that, you're going to take a dice or a die and put it on top of your deck. So that way you remember that the next card you play after this gets +3 to the blue number at the bottom right of the card. Okay. Then you're going to commit your character if your character is not already committed. Okay. And that's how you use that enhance. Now, you don't get that enhance if Summon Dark Shadow was not added to the card pool from your hand. Okay, just keep that in mind. You can only activate enhance abilities on action cards if they come from your hand going into the card pool. All right, and that is it for actions. So just remember, actions come from the hand, go into the card pool. At the end of the turn, if they are still in the card pool, they go into the discard pile, not the stage, because they do not go into the stage area. All right. And last but not least, we have asset cards. Asset cards are the green bordered cards that are just like foundations. The only thing you cannot do with them is commit them to pay for checks. You cannot commit asset cards to pay for other cards. You can only use foundations and face down foundations. Cards that have been flipped face down or built face down to pay for checks, but assets cannot unless they are face down. Then you can use an asset, but I don't know anything that really flips assets face down. Maybe in the future, maybe there will be. Anyway, we're going to talk about the first of two assets, which is quick creation, which will be on the screen now. Assets are like permanents or like enchantments. They're there to give you strong effects, but not really do anything else. And you can build them from the card pool like a foundation. So as you see, quick creation is a 2 difficulty asset that is green and bordered. It's like an emerald color when you see it in person. It's got the green background with the light green dots. It has a 2 mid-block modifier. Quick creation has the symbol of all, which is the orange dot with the arrows around it. Good, which is the halo symbol. And then it has life, which is the yellow background with the leaf or grass icon in front of it. So in the text box, we have Breaker 1 and Weapon. We've seen Breaker from previous cards in this reference guide. To the far right of the text box, we have the gear symbol, which in small text next to it, it says asset, so you know it's an asset. And then we have the first enhance, which says enhance, commit this card, add the top card of your discard pile to your card pool. This attack gets +2 or -2 damage. Now, one thing I want to note about this enhance is that there are a lot of enhance abilities that can be used on both turns for both players. So if you have quick creation on your side of the field and it's your opponent's turn and you want to give their attack -2 damage, you can use that enhance. Or you can use it to give your attack +2 damage. The reason why it adds a card from the top of your discard pile to your card pool is because Momo, the character, has a way of building weapon cards like quick creation and other cards that have weapon in their name into the stage and kind of like cheating them out so you don't have to pay for the cost. They go from the graveyard, aka the discard pile, to the card pool, then into your field, aka your stage, and you just get to cheat it out really fast and get it, and you're able to use it. Okay. So the next enhance ability is something new to this guide or tutorial. It is called Deadlock. Deadlock is an enhance where your opponent has to have 11 or more foundations in their stage area. That is the Deadlock ruling. So as long as your opponent, not you, as long as your opponent has 11 or more cards in their card pool, you can activate a Deadlock enhance ability or a Deadlock ability in general, in case they make Deadlock forms or something crazy like that, or Deadlock responses. So this also has the word first in it, which we learned from the foundations section with League Interview. First means this has to be the first thing that you do. So Deadlock, when they have 11 or more cards in their card pool, first meaning it's the first enhance that you have to do during the turn, as long as your rival is in deadlock. So it says commit, which is to turn it sideways. Double your weapon's attack, speed, and damage. I'll read that again. So it says commit, double your weapon attacks, speed, and damage. So if your weapon has, just for a general example, if your weapon had 5 speed, 5 damage, and your rival was in deadlock, this makes it 10 speed, 10 damage. And you can have up to 4 quick creations in your deck. So if you have all 4 on the field, it would go from 5 to 10, from 10 to 20, from 20 to 40, and you can see how out of hand that would get. So that's a really strong ability. It kind of tries to deter your opponent from building so many foundations, but at the same time, it gives you a way to sort of fight back against your opponent having so many resources, because the more resources a player has, the more they can block, the less damage they take, and the more resources they have to play more attacks themselves and have more freedom to play more cards. All right, so the next asset card that I'm going to cover is a terrain. Terrains are like field spells, and you're not going to see them too often, but who knows, in the future you might see them more. So if you're familiar with Yu-Gi-Oh and some other card games have field spells where as long as this one card is on the field, both players get access to its abilities. So the asset that I'm going to cover today is UA High. And why not cover UA High since we're covering My Hero Academia? UA High is a 3 difficulty asset with a 2 high block modifier. It has the elements of chaos, which is the triangle with arrows, that's bronze. It has good, which is the halo, and life, which is the yellow dot with the leaf. It has in blue text terrain to let you know that this is a special card. And even though it doesn't say it on the cards, the ruling is you can only have 1 terrain on the field at a time. Every terrain has a passive ability. UA High's passive ability is while this card is in your stage, at the end of each player's turn, that player may draw 1 card and discard 1 card. Its enhance ability says enhance, remove, as in remove this card, add 1 ally card from your discard pile to your hand. And that's any ally card. So that could be an attack, a foundation, an action card. It could be another asset. It could be something new if they come up with down the road. If they make characters into allies, it could be that. So you can just grab any ally card in your discard pile and add it to your hand. All right. And that about does it for assets. Assets are very straightforward and simple. They're just like foundations, except you just cannot tap them to pay for passing checks. And that's it. And that is also it for this tutorial. Thank you very much for using this as a guide. I'm sorry the video had to be so long, but there are a lot of examples and I tried to make this as short as possible. But this game is pretty complicated. It's very detailed, but it's not complicated in a way that doesn't make it fun. There's just a very steep learning curve, and once you learn the mechanics and where everything goes, where the cards go, the game is a blast, to be honest. I've had so much fun with the game personally, and I can't tell you enough about the experiences I've had with the people I've had and the decks I've built. And the more and more cards come out, the more of my favorite characters coming out from the anime, and the more strategies I get to build and play around with, the more it starts to open my eyes to kind of just seeing where I can connect the dots and strategies and stuff and just have a lot of fun. So I'm gonna let you go from here. It's been over an hour. My voice hurts. Like, comment, subscribe for more. I'm going to be doing more videos in the future. covering more parts of the game for beginners to make it more friendly, to give people a reference and where to go. I will be doing a live demonstration of how to go through turns to make it easier for those to understand what happens when someone goes first and when someone goes second. So stay tuned for those, but I will see you guys in the next video.